Welcome to the Innovation in Higher Education podcast, where we share the diverse views and perspectives of experts in higher education, HR, innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship from all around the world on topics related to the future of higher education and the future of work in an engaging, fresh, friendly, and very human format. Today's episode comes in partnership with MARIHE, the Master in Research and Innovation in Higher Education. Let's get started. Welcome to a new episode of the Innovation in Higher Education podcast. My name is Viviana Rojas. I am the director of Digitalmente, an innovation consulting firm for higher education and talent development. Today, I am joined by Emmanuel Burgoa, country officer for Latin America and the Caribbean at EITI, and one of our consultants at Digitalmente. We will both be your hosts for this episode. Hi, Emmanuel, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Very happy to be here with our special guest.
Yeah, very nice. Now let's go into the topic of today. Today's topic is change management in universities. And for this, we have the pleasure of being here with Attila Pausits, head of the department and professor for higher education research and development at University for Continuing Education, Krems. And he is also the academic director of MARIHE, the Master in Research and Innovation in Higher Education, with whom we will delve into the challenges, solution pathways, and best practices of managing change in universities. So let's give him a warm welcome. Hi, Attila. Nice to see you here after some time.
Hi, Viviana. Hi, Emmanuel. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Topic of today is I think it's a very complex one. We will talk about change management in universities and the process of change management, its challenges, the pathways for solutions, and the best practices that maybe you can share with us that you know from university change management. So I will start with a broad question to open this huge discussion. So I would ask you, how do you see the general state of university change management, especially after the effects of the pandemic, especially after COVID-19?
Well, thank you for this indeed complex question, and most probably it's not easy to answer this within a couple of minutes. I will try. I will try to do my best. I remember a publication written by Mike Shattuck, a former registrar of Warwick University, in his famous book about managing successful universities. He started the publication with, for me, a very kind of famous sentence saying that universities are not famous because of the willingness to change, but because of the research and teaching. Today, we might add also third mission as an additional kind of pillar here. But I think the message here in this statement is quite clear that, of course, the focus, and if I look back in the past, the universities was not, on organizational issues or management of universities, but was more related to the missions, the functions, the services of a university. Of course, and we all know that this has changed towards new public management, towards the increased autonomy of universities, partially also because of our contributions as higher education researchers into the field of studies about universities and organizations. We all know, of course, that universities and organizations are one of the most or oldest organizational types on earth, besides the church and the military. So starting with this, we are talking about a very old organization in terms of not only functions, but also practices. Many of these practices are well written, related to quality assurance, quality enhancements, which we already, I think, pushed forward in the last 20 years or so. But there is also many, when it comes to organization and change, is not, explicit, but implicit because of the actors, the academics, and the administration at the universities. And nowadays we have even a third group of people, the third space worker. It's Celia Richards, I think back in 2006, pointed out that because of this increased complexity of universities in terms of providing different services, there is also a need to introduce or develop additional competences and also functions within universities. So what we are facing, and it was not, is not only driven by COVID, but we saw in the last 20 years an increased kind of complexity coming from outside in terms of what is required that the university should provide. Say, talking about employability, we could look back to the Bologna process, which was, I would think or say, as one major change process, and still ongoing one in the history of higher education. And of course, you could name a long list of different aspects like accountability, lifelong learning, internationalization. So looking back, I think there is the universities are in a continuous change process because of different services and activities, which they developed in the last decade or so. So my first statement was, well, they are not really willing to change, but in fact they are entirely, or changing all the time. So, and then we got COVID, and if I look back to the last 2-3 years, I had a feeling, and there's also a number of research showing this or underlining this, that this entire adoption at the universities. Of course, and one institution a little bit better and another not that good. But in general, universities managed the COVID pandemic in a good way. And I think that when it comes to change, and maybe based on these example of COVID, I would see 3 or even 4 elements here. One is the development of the profession. So we see a huge improvement in terms of staff competences, also provided by internal training and human resource development, linked to the strategy and function of universities. So as we all know, the staff is always the key. One could argue, but saying that, but the staff is the key, but this is also the limitation somehow when it comes to change. And here, what we also observe that in a very moment, the pain is bigger not to change, comparison to be, to remain in the same position and the same structure. So that if you increase the pain, you push forward the change also. And I think COVID it was a really painful, kind of experience, and also experiment for most of the universities. And I think there's professional support services, talking about teaching and learning, human resource development, but also this openness of what you would call this the academic habitus. So I have a problem, I need a solution. And I think it was also clear that it was also not only driven by those structures and the academics, but also towards the leadership of universities. So that would be my third point here, to name or mention that without the proper leadership, you can't really develop, or implement change processes. And maybe the fourth one is about professional management practices, including tools and instruments. However, I'm a bit also not skeptical, but I think we with the new public management kind of wave, we had a very strong focus on instruments and tools. And I think this is it was maybe at the early stage was the right kind of enabler or kind of an instrument to bring in change, while saying, okay, now we have an e-learning tool, we have a new research management process management tool in place whatsoever. But of course, with all this instruments, we mainly support, software supports tools, we also ended up with a kind of a certain standardization of practices inside the universities. So change brought also kind of a homogeneous approaches at universities, and this is also what we saw towards the COVID pandemic. That using the same tools, using the same approaches, we ended up also to develop pretty much the same quality of services over the different institutional types. Of course, with some limitations we all know related to the possibility to run an online class, or you have to go to the laboratory because it is required. So I think that it's also clear that this is not one fits for all kind of approach. Also, when it comes to the change management, we did not talk about the cultural elements. So to implement the change process in Germany, most probably will be definitely different to implement the change process in Mexico or in Greece. And I think these are also these cultural elements. Besides, that we have this picture of a university, which is not a homogeneous one. So there's a lot of diversity. But of course, we have a specialized universities, we have a comprehensive universities, and so on and so on. So I think that this is also this institutional context is important when it comes to change. However, very often these change processes are kind of driven by system level changes, whether European policies or national policies. And I mean, just to give you an example, the new European Universities Initiative is such a, I would say, an instrument to force change, to ask for more collaboration and cooperation between universities. So maybe that could be a kind of an intro talking about the change management. And again, I think that COVID is just an example. What I see here a danger that we get into a kind of an institutional practice saying, oh, we managed COVID, it was a great achievement, let's go back to normal. So let's return, the old fashioned, which we all know, old practices, processes. And I think that this is also a danger if you go through such a major change process, and then suddenly you say, okay, well, it's over, so let's go back to the old practices because we all love them. And I think this is the period of time where many universities kind of trying to negotiate or try to find a solution here, which change elements they should keep, and what are those elements which we do not need, so that in the future we can just replace them with maybe old practices at the institutional level.
You have actually mentioned many points that I noted down that I wanted to cover, especially this last thing that you said, that now the main question, and this is a question that has arose, not only in this interview, but in previous interviews I've had with other higher education experts. We're all wondering if change will be sustained now that COVID is ending, because then, of course, COVID was a trigger for change. COVID was an additional external pressure for change. But now that things are going back to normal, we are going back to presentiality. The threat, I think the major threat for change is that we go to the old ways because it's easier, like for many people, especially for many people in university, in higher education institutions, change hasn't been something easy to accept or something easy to adapt to. So so now I think that's the main threat for advancing. Maybe what would you say about it? What is your opinion about it?
Just coming back to this sentence Mike Shattuck said, the willingness. I think the key element here is the willingness of individuals, the willingness of organizational unit and the willingness of the leadership of the university. And I think there is when it comes to willingness, you could, kind of keep this willingness in a high level in a way that you bring in additional change initiatives, which might be not linked only to COVID, but other, reorganizational ideas or practices. And the question is, shall we keep the level of the heat, so to say, as we had in the last 2 years in terms of, you have to change, you have to be adaptive, you have to become, open-minded towards, say, those changes, or with this we destroy an institutional integrity, being one of the oldest organizational forms on earth. So how much of this willingness is needed in order to meet the organizational goals and the maybe reposition your own university, to introduce new services whatsoever. So I think this is also a strategic kind of issue here. How to balance this or how to find the balance between stability and change. Because if you are always in the changing mode, then you are losing stability. I think this is very dangerous because you need a stability. You have to offer your students, your professors, your administration, those cornerstones which say, okay, this is stable. This is gonna be stable. And one could argue that this is the academic culture. Another could argue that definitely this is not what we want. We really want to change our culture. But I think it's very crucial to identify those, points and elements which should remain stable, and also identify those elements has to be changed in order to meet the strategy and the mission of the university in the future. And I think that many of us, most probably, are a bit tired, just looking back to the last 2 years, regarding this, learning path we went through. I think with a kind of a fast forward movement. I think we developed a number of, new skills, which are, competences and services, which most probably we would develop if there would be a normal speed in 5 to 10 years. We did it in a 2 years, period. And now it's a question, do we need to take a rest just to
avoid burnout?
I mean, this is also, yes. I mean, if you look to the psychological issues around students, academic staff, yes. There are issues here definitely yes. around, and so changes, and I think this is maybe something that we should look at, not only regarding COVID, but in general when it comes to change, the unintended consequences. So what are the unintended consequences of a change process? Very often we are so focused on the targets and the goals we want to reach or get towards this change process that we forget about the unintended consequences. And I think that this is something that when it comes to policy formations, when it comes to institutional change, when it comes to the introduction, like in the case of Austria, of a new kind of approach or a model of a continuing education, academic continuing education, then is always also a question. Okay, I'm going to change this. What happened with the other parts? So what are the consequences somewhere else, which is maybe not on my screen, because this is not my focus in the change. But I think this is very important that we reflect. And also we see not only the trees, but the forest when it comes to change.
Emma, I don't know if you have...
yeah, I mean, I have many thoughts here. I would like to say, because you're talking about like recommendations, no? How we should see like changing the organizations, but I'm willing to hear about actually what is, from your perspective, happening in the European landscape. Are what would you say is actually happening? Like, are universities willing to changing currently? Are they keeping this pace of change, or that came after COVID, or are they just going back to old practice? Like, in practice, what is happening? And we were talking also about like COVID as a factor that triggered change in
Catalyzer, yeah.
universities, a catalyzer.
Yes.
But I'm keen to hear what you think about other factors that are also triggering change very recently, like the energy crisis worldwide, like the energy transition worldwide. Like, more and more we see like these demands,
Labor
and it
market
seems,
demands as well.
and although the COVID, of course, had a super huge impact in universities, the energy transition and the energy crisis worldwide is having a huge impact too in the world. So how are universities coping with this? Are they seeing like a real factor of change here?
Yeah, of course, the question is about, well, we're talking about the kind of a short-term, mid-term, long-term changes. Many of these, the COVID, the recent energy crisis, these are rather kind of, a very short kind of effects. So just in kind of an emergent situation we are right now. And I think there is a danger that with this kind of major challenges, we call them, the COVID or the energy issue these days, we forget about the other elements or parts of of an organization, and they push forward this kind of key issues, key challenges we are facing, and then we forget about all the other ones. They are in place. Then it's a short term. I think that could work, but in the midterm and long term, I think that that could be a real disaster. And then if you look back to the last 20 years, we have always this kind of heated debate dedicated to kind of buzzwords or key topics like access, funding, maybe even this issue around third mission and engagement. But there are other issues in there or in place, and today we are talking about energy, and just since 2 days, some students took over some seminar rooms and they dedicated Austrian universities to kind of demonstrate against this, recent developments regarding climate, regarding energy, and regarding also how the government deals with these challenges, and what kind of support they gave to universities to overcome this energy crisis. And so I think these are crucial issues, and these are those issues which are kind of predominantly presented in media. But there are many other issues which are now under the radar. And I think this is, if we have this focus always on one key topic or one issue, then we are kind of running in danger that we forget about the complexity. We forget about other services, other elements which are also important and key. And so this is the issue of domination of certain issues in the change process or in organizational development, and then the complex organizations universities are. So I think that this is a kind of a danger that maybe we forget about, parts which are crucial and important while pushing dedicated issues, in the front of our discussion about higher education. And we could take this the point of COVID or the recent crisis, and we could look this from different angles and perspectives, like what does it mean for career development, what's about gender issues in the given setting. I think that this is a kind of a a very complex element and issue. And because you asked me about the willingness and our universities are in a kind of a changing mode, they are always, they are always in a kind of a changing mode. I mean, it's an organization looking back to the bottom heavy or, the loosely coupled system of a university towards an entrepreneurial university. So I think these are kind of conceptual frameworks which are kind of dominating also our discussion or about an ideal university type. And in the very same time, you ask also for, the positioning universities. But if you push one ideal kind of concept of university, like the entrepreneurial university, to the kind of a forefront, and you ask more or less all universities to become an entrepreneurial university, I think this is a huge danger that you create, a kind of a similar solution for all of our challenges. And I'm not that entirely sure that this is the right way. So I think diversity in terms of organizational structures, culture, also missions is needed. But of course we have, when it comes to, the notion of university, most probably all of us here in this chat, but, even globally, we have a picture, what a university is. So we have a kind of the DNA, which we would say, okay, this is the DNA of the university. And then the question is how much we should or can change this DNA in the future. So, between innovation, organizational innovation, and integrity is a very thin line. And there is a danger that with innovation, we destroy integrity. On the other hand, if you are not kind of moving with a society, if we do not respond to the needs, then we lose also, our innovation capacity, and with it also our integrity. So I think this is not an easy issue here, and therefore I think professional leadership is needed. People are able to lead those changes. We recently published a report on efficiency and investment in education in a more efficient way, and this is not then easy to so where should you put your effort, resources, your money in order to facilitate change or improve our higher education? And we have some evidences coming from the field of research with some data, but we have also some blind spots. We don't have any idea, what is an efficient investment. So what would be, the kind of an outcome or the impact, especially of this change in the future. At this very moment, I think most of the universities are navigating in a kind of in a short-term perspective, and this is very dangerous. So we should keep also the midterm and long-term perspective, even though we are in a kind of an emergent mode because of COVID and because of the crisis related to energy.
I have a question about something that you mentioned. You mentioned the concept of integrity in universities, integrity in academic institutions. Can you go a bit deeper on this? What do you exactly mean by integrity? Do you mean, do you use this concept as a synonym of the DNA of the university, or how are you using it in this context?
Yeah, I think the integrity is a kind of a complex concept here again. I think it's about first of all, it's about values. So what are, just going back to this DNA kind of statement from before. So we have core values, we have core missions.
Yes.
So we have a kind of an understanding about academia. Yeah. And this is a kind of and we also developed a kind of a trustful relationship between society and academia or universities. In some cases, is more connected to public higher education. We all know that in some cases, even connected in some countries to private higher education. So there is also kind of a diverse picture here. But this kind of relationship has been fundamentally influenced in the last years in terms of fake news, in terms of how far we trust universities, how far we trust academics, you know, in recent debates. And this is, I think, an issue of this institutional integrity. So how can we keep this integrity in order to develop a trustful partnership with the society and or societies? And I think this is a fundamental question for us as academics, for units, and also for entire institutions, in order to keep this, you know, integrity, to rely on the fundamental kind of DNA. We would see that this is a university, and try to, you know, be still open towards innovation. And then I think this is one issue here is speed. So if you are too fast, then you most likely could lose your integrity if you bring in too much of change into an organization. And this is not only the university, but in most probably in any organization would be the case that it is too fast. I know that in the there's also examples also in the theory and the practice saying that a fast change is needed, and therefore you know, in order to destroy all the defending walls in an organization, the easiest way is just to, you know, move fast. I think a very good example is Twitter these days, which is I think not a good example in terms of organizational change, but I think it's a good example of, you know, the issue of speed. And I think that this is for universities, I don't think that speed is the right answer, because speed would really bring a danger of regarding institutional integrity. On the other hand, we know that universities are kind of an engine or should become an engine for innovation. So we need also to transfer our research into innovation. We have to open towards, you know, societal needs. We have to develop services like technology and knowledge transfer, and so on and so on. So by saying this, we still need to rely on the first and second mission, I would say. So I mentioned at the beginning the third mission as a third pillar. In fact, this third pillar is not an independent pillar, but the third mission is in fact linked to or supported by the first and second mission of universities. So and I think that's maybe the issue here regarding, you know, institutional integrity. And of course, there is a lot already written, you know, how to keep this integrity by certain standards, by certain, you know, so the role of a senate, the role of different units in providing research and teaching services. But still, I think this is a, you know, if you always just kind of respond and not, so if you are always reacting, but we can't really be acting as a kind of, you know, always just responding to certain needs, there is also a danger that I think in English you call it wake the dog, so that you are not really entirely, you know, kind of in a position that you control your own organization, but others are controlling you because of these approaches to meet the expectations of others.
Yeah, which is, I think, in a way what has been happened with this huge I mean, when we talk about integrity, trust, we have to talk about accountability, NPM, and the reaction that universities are having to this, the homogenization of universities. So the question is how far we're gonna go, or how far universities are gonna go there, right?
But I would argue here that I mean, while universities are of course entitled to have their own values and integrity, they also have a social responsibility, because they're part of a the social context. Universities have to be active players in the betterment of societies, especially given third mission. So there is a huge social responsibility on the shoulders of universities, I think. And you were mentioning that universities have to be how's it go, producers of innovation and research, but as well they have a big responsibility with students to be producers of talent, right? And one of the main desirable outputs or outcomes that students expect from their experiences in universities is the ability to, after their studies, entering the labor market and entering the labor market with the required skills that would make them competitive out there, outside the academic environment. So when you were mentioning the speed of change, and when you were mentioning, is it really good to rush universities into change? Is it dangerous? Is it threatening or not? I would argue that given the whole context, not only the academic context, but bringing together what's happening with society, what's happening in the industry, speed is kind of necessary in this case, right? Because universities are lagging behind change for many years. This doesn't come from the pandemic, and universities have as you mentioned, are one of the most traditional institutions that exist at the moment, next to the church, which is a big thing to say. It's a big comparison to make. So from my question right now is is the issue of speed at the moment would still be considered under the same circumstances of speed, given the fact that it's something that it's long overdue? So right now it's kind of, we need to hurry up a bit, right? To make up for all these years that we're lagging behind. It's not something that just arose yesterday and now we're rushing. It's something that comes from a long tradition and long story, from decades, that people are talking about what is the new, or what should be the new role of universities, how universities should change, why are they not changing. So what kind of speed are we talking about right now?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think when it comes to speed, we see different approaches, and the issue of speed is most probably also linked to a number of factors, like how old this particular university is, how big is this particular university is, where is this university embedded, who are the competitors, how fast the competitors are moving. So I think there's a number of elements which definitely would influence the issue of speed. However, it doesn't matter how fast you or how slow you drive, you should have a good engine.
Yes.
And I think this is the most crucial one. So to establish those practices, competences, professional working environment, to be able to facilitate change and manage these changes, which we all obviously know that this is not a stable game. So this is an ongoing kind of adoption is needed. And I think that this is something that maybe some of the institutions are a bit too slow, as you just said before, and that should speed up. But I think before they speed up, they should really think about how they, facilitate those changes, and what should they do, and how could they, manage this in a good way, in a short, mid, or long-term perspective. And I think this is not about revolution. This is about the evolutionary process. And I think speed really could destroy the integrity if you do too fast, especially not in a professional manner way. And this is something that I always see as a huge difference between a company, the business sector, and the university. A company would search for, a good solution in a given situation. And the university is searching always for the best solution on earth. And this is related to, the academic habitus. And very often we ended up in a number of, kind of heated discussions about change and change processes inside universities. Simply because, which are kind of driven not, we need a solution right now. Well, instead of, saying, well, we need a solution forever. And I think this is something that we have to accept, that in the very moment we develop a strategy and we start to implement the strategy, at some point this strategy is outdated already because of the dynamics. It's just said before that there is so much changing that you can't really, adapt in the same speed. So, talking about employability, so you start to develop a program, you offer courses, you develop the competences, and this just simply takes time. And at the very end, you develop those graduates, and then the market would tell you, okay, well, 80% fine, but 20% is just outdated, just these competencies. And then the question is how to deal with this. And for that, for example, we just started at my university a research project on meta competences. So competences which are not entirely related to, a given employability setting, is just, for example, the ability to learn or the ability to communicate the learning. So those kind of competences which you could use in a more transversal context, one. And the second, and this is an ongoing debate in Europe regarding the so-called European values. And I think higher education is a bit more than only developing competences. This is also about developing values, attitudes. And here I think just coming back to this institutional integrity, if we always turn towards the market needs, we might also forget about these values and, and the assumptions which we should kind of think of when it comes to, for example, teaching and learning. So I see this issue of values something that is a bit under the radar in the given setting, and I think that this is something that we should maybe discuss. So what are the values of a university today, and what are the values in for example in 5 or 10 years time? And yeah, I'm be happy to listen to another podcast where you're discussing the issue of values with some other experts in the future.
Yes, that's a good topic actually, because from my perspective, if you have your values clear, you have a lot of flexibility in your actions. So there's a difference between the actions that you take and the values that are underlying the values that are underlying these actions. So I would say that if university, in the case of universities, that abiding to market needs doesn't necessarily have to be or have to contrast or be contrary to the values that the university establishes. Because if, for example, if a university establishes as a value that we will be working towards serving society or societal needs, and then this becomes a societal need, like adapting to the market becomes a societal need. So therefore, university abiding by their values will go into this, right? And so maybe right now we're talking about redefining, as you mentioned, redefining the values of universities at the moment, like comparing what is and of course bringing into account what is the role of universities now in society with this context. You also mentioned something about that universities often search for the best solution for something, not for a short-term solution, but for the best solution. And this is why it sometimes takes so much time to do something or to apply change in general. But I would argue as well that in a changing environment like the one we are facing now, uncertainty and all these mega trends that we already mentioned, searching for the best solution and waiting to have the best solution is maybe not the right approach, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So maybe here an agile approach is more fit, right, to this. So what is the response from universities to that?
I think you have here two possible approaches. One is the forced change, and another is an unforced change. Mm-hmm. The forced change, this is, I think, much easier because this is something that you can deal with, right? So you develop a change process. Maybe you invite even an external expert to facilitate this entire support this change process. You have your clear goals and procedures how to get there. But besides this kind of formal change initiatives, you have also unforced change processes, which are again under the radar. If you hire a new professor, if you start a new program, I mean, Erasmus Mundus is an excellent example that we wanted to, for example, in my case at my university, we wanted to support the internationalization strategy with an Erasmus Mundus program. Mm-hmm. And the Erasmus Mundus program changed from inside the institution, which was not a forced change. It was, in fact, an unforced change in order to be able to facilitate such a new program for a very first time at the university. So, and I think this is also an aspect which we should take into consideration. Or when it comes to staff development towards hiring new professors, next generation kind of scholars. I think these are also they have an immediate effect on the institution. And you can do this by specific selection procedures in order to have the best fit, between the new colleague and the unit or the university. But definitely these new colleagues will bring in also some new ideas which you had not on your radar so far when you run the selection. So, and the question is how to monitor, how to evaluate these unforced changes, which are just happening in a more evolutionary, not that much controlled way, because usually you have this the big picture initiatives. Okay, we want to introduce a new internationalization strategy. We are going to do this and this. We have those tasks and deliverables and so on. And then you have the other part, which is just from one day to another just happened, and you don't you ask yourself, okay, how can this happen? We did not, it was not intended. And I think this was said before, these unintended consequences of those change initiatives. And you're right, to be agile as good as possible is always good, to be able also to maneuver. And here again, of course, the size of the university, institutional practices, and so on, definitely has an impact on, or have an impact on this attitude of being flexible.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is very interesting, and this is very complex, as you said. I think all these topics, and it's actually very interesting because sometimes I think it's I've seen this very frequently when we evaluate problems, programs, change in the organizations. It seems to be very easy if we take a model and we try to apply something, but in fact it's super complex sometimes change in the organizations, there are many underlying problems, unintended consequences that we have to take into consideration. And now I'm a bit curious to hear, because we have heard from the higher education perspective, but the universities are working with another actors, external stakeholders. What would you say these external stakeholders can do to support universities in this path of change? Is there anything, like any recommendation you might have for, let's say, industry, government stakeholders, how to strengthen this and how to support universities?
Of course, I mean, this issue of third mission, community engagement, services, you name them, are kind of very crucial in order to detect the needs, also to leave the ivory tower, and also to be able to develop a common understanding. And very often the first issue or challenge is the language, so that the community partners or a business is talking a different language as academia doing. The second is the missing arena, so there is not that many opportunities to interact with the university. So how to become a university and an open organization in one hand side, but just remember my statement, wake the dog. So it's also, you know, if you always just listen to the outside world and then you try to adapt, and, you know, the one group is telling you this, another group is telling you that. So how to maneuver through, how to balance these expectations and kind of a shareholder value approach. So how to be open, but also integral is not that easy to manage. And most probably each of these parts you mentioned would say ask for different activities and services when it comes to the university. And the question is how to manage this complexity. And the answer was in the past to give more autonomy to institutions in order to, you know, create a more closer relationship, to be more also free to establish those relationships. So you don't need a kind of the support of the ministry or a decision-making process where a ministry is involved. So autonomy was an answer here in the past. However, it seems that some of the higher education systems recognized also that autonomy brought also some kind of negative issues or challenges, like how to deal with complexity. And many of the recent you know, rectors and presidents of universities are saying that in the given setting, we are not able to deal with this complexity in the same way. So we have to reduce our complexity. And this is, you know, it's institutional strategy and saying, okay, we are doing this, but we are definitely not doing that. Mm-hmm. And this is a challenge within the organization to make this decision and also support this. This means you have inside the organization a university winners and losers, at least in their perspective. And then you have the outside world and say, okay, this university is not talking to us, is not willing to work with us. And then, okay, so what is the, you know, if such complaint arrives, so what, you know, especially when it comes to public university, so what is the public mission of the university? To exclude, for example, you know, some of the actors. And I think this is also a huge danger here that you run if you, with, you know, you include or dedicate with a dedicated focus, and at the very same time you exclude some other actors and some other players. So how to manage resources? This is the key question. And some universities and leaders already called to reduce the autonomy of institutions in order to be able to deal with the complexity, but not at the institutional level, but at the system level. So quite interesting, you know, development that we were kind of quite sure that with autonomy, we would be able to manage this, external relationships in a better way. And now we see also that because of the complexity and also the dynamics, there is a real challenge in institutional management also for the leadership to deal with this kind of complexity in a good way. And I think this is about inclusion and exclusion, which is not that easy to maneuver or also manage and negotiate inside a university, but also outside. And for this reason, a recent European project started to develop a tool, for example, to detect, to evaluate, to identify institutional practices toward community engagement. So with this tool, from the institutional perspective, you can kind of describe your engagement practices. So at least you have a picture in order to make decisions later on. And this is the TEPSI toolbox. And now we are involved in a kind of TEPSI. And now we are in the follow-up initiative, the SHEPSI, where we try to develop also policy recommendations, how to support institutions to manage community engagement in the future. And I think this is a very complex issue, which is something that most probably will lead to future initiatives, research, and hopefully also supports and the leadership and also academics to be able to deal with, I think very, very important and crucial elements like service learning. So we know that service learning is an excellent, instrument to be integrated into the curriculum and offer students the, real kind of task, real challenge problems, and deal with external partners in teaching and learning processes. But it's also, a lot of work and requires also additional competences by the academics or teachers that run these courses. So how to support this, how to provide a proper, partner, how to find this partner outside the university, who should be responsible for this partner seeking? Is it the lecturer who is in charge of the service learning exercise? Is it a kind of a central unit, which is, in charge of these external relations? So I think these are also different approaches and practices here at the institutional level. And I think that this is something, again, not a one fits for all solution here, but it's managing the external relations. I think this is a topic for me as an academic, is a topic for me as a head of a unit or a dean, and of course the director or president of the university.
Retaking our conversation, Emmanuel had to leave for another meeting, so he had to leave this podcast recording, but there's no problem. We're still here with Attila. So Attila, following up on our conversation, and just as a closure as well, because we have been discussing this matter for already, I think, 1 hour, I would like to ask you about what is your opinion about the ways of moving forward with change, given all these issues that we have discussed, the complexity in universities, that not one size fits all model of change for universities, the matter of speed as well, the values and all these integrity related issues that you were talking. So given all these complex factors, what do you think is the way forward for managing change in universities, for actually establishing a change management strategy that works in universities?
I'll give you two kind of corner examples, two extremes, right? So one extreme is the recently established initiative by the European Commission to develop the so-called European universities, where a number of universities should work together, develop a mission, a strategy, and implement jointly certain activities in teaching, research, and and outreach and services, which I think, given this institutional complexity of each and every university, you increase the complexity by putting, a number of universities together. And we see also very large consortia where, 16, 18 universities should work together. And I'm not entirely sure that this could or will work because of the given institutional complexities, and higher education or education in general is still a national issue. So we have this also when it comes to funding, when it comes to regulations. We have still this, the national kind of power in place. Another extreme is that you reduce, your complexity by, developing very specialized universities more and more, because a specialized university, we would give you a dedicated framework that you provide only this and this services, which would be a kind of an approach, towards complexity reduction. But I'm not entirely sure that this should go for each and every higher education in Europe and elsewhere. So I think there is a good balance or mixture between different higher education types. I think what is needed is, of course, a professional approach towards change management. As we just when we started our discussion, I already mentioned those elements which are, I think, crucial, starting with the leadership and most probably ending with tools and instruments in order to facilitate change processes. Of course, we have a number of issues like funding, quality assurance, autonomy, which definitely also influence, change processes. And then we have these waves of change, or kind of certain directions, like the Bologna process was such a wave, or now nowadays the European University initiatives. I think in this very moment, more than 300 universities are involved in dedicated European University initiatives. So it seems that this way forward could be also something that universities are interested in. At this very moment, I don't know how sustainable this kind of initiatives will be. I think that there are good examples where universities are really taking this very serious, and there's really a willingness for this kind of a change. Why other universities join this kind of consortia just in order to join the club, but not really, eager to entirely fulfill the driving idea of this European universities initiative. I think when it comes to change, we should still keep this idea of institutional values, integrity, by keeping, the missions, so to say, in the front of our debates and ideas, and relying still on this, factors or elements which we all know are crucial, and this is the stuff. Now, when it comes to change, you need your employees, you need your academics, you need your administration in order to facilitate and implement change.
Yes, especially in a university environment, which has in most cases, especially here in Europe, I think this is a standard. It has a shared governance structure, right? So it's crucial, I think, for changes to be implemented and to work to involve all the stakeholders within the university, and that they feel that they are part of the change, that they feel that they created the change as well. So co-creation, I think it's a good practice for managing change in a shared governance institution, especially, right? What are your takes on this?
I think that's I mean, this is not, this is not reducing complexity. This is increasing complexity. But without this involvement, you can't really make sustainable improvements and changes.
Exactly.
So I think you don't need only the commitment of saying, okay, like, I use these communities to inform, so that I have an informed change process. But you should also rely on their different perspectives and try to incorporate into your change process. So very often I have a feeling that this is rather, these arenas with different communities, and to listen to their needs is rather kind of window dressing exercise in the change process, to say, okay, we did this, or because we had to do this, but in fact there is no impact and the result of this kind of involvement at all. And I think this is a very dangerous kind of a step. So my recommendation would be then rather, neglect this kind of interaction instead of not taking, really as a serious a contribution and different communities, because then you are losing the trust towards these communities. And I think that's also important, that you don't use these instruments just to justify your already made decisions, just to share this information with others. So I think this is about, back to the issue of academic habitus. It's about, the professional approach towards change management, and also valuing, the time and resources which are others investing in order to help you as an institution. I think this is also, when you talk to your alumni, when you talk to your external partners, they invest. And I think this is also something that you have to keep in mind, that this is also, a value behind this. And I think that maybe these are those issues which I would look at or recommend when it comes to change process.
Yeah. Speaking about academic habits, do you think they can actually be changed? Like, do you think?
Oh, they are changing. I mean, they are changing. Okay. I mean, if you look to the different career pathways, if you look to the the approaches, how institutions are dealing with postdocs, the tenure track, yes or no. I'm not. We are not going to talk about the tenure track today, but these are those possible instruments or approaches which are already in place. And I think that the next generation early career researcher, they bring in additional competences which a university and institution for definitely use in order to develop the organization for the better. So I would here also recommend not only to listen to the well-established experts and scholars inside a university, but also to listen to this very dynamic next generation scholars entering higher education. And there is also, I think, a huge danger in some of the countries, and I would call here Austria and Germany most probably as not that good examples, that those countries not really offering a long-lasting perspective for early career stage researchers or postdocs. So I think this is also a huge kind of debate these days about this fixed term relationships, and then also that after a number of years you have to leave academia if you did not get a proper position, and so on. So there are, I think, a number of issues here to be discussed, and also maybe issues which we should change when it comes to career developments and career perspectives in higher education, as well as how we could use those competences and especially the next generation in order to develop our institutions for the better.
Okay. And something came to my mind while you were explaining this issue. You mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation the willingness to change of the organization, right? Of the people conforming the organization. So this brings me to the topic of mindsets, right? Because you need to have an open mindset and a flexible mindset in order to be willing to change, right? So would you say that the required mindset for change is right now existing in academia and universities, or it still needs to be developed? And if it needs to be developed, what are your takes on the probabilities that academics actually change their mindsets? Okay, I leave it.
I think that, yeah, I think, we have now this, because of COVID, this emergent case of, for change. Mm-hmm. And then you got, more or less this mode of change into your organization. Mm-hmm. And the question is, what is the best approach for each and every, for individual universities? Mm-hmm. Most probably for some of them would be important to keep this, level of change in order to maneuver and prepare the university for the future. In other cases, maybe the university is already in a proper kind of stage or setting that you don't need this kind of a speed, or you don't need mm-hmm. this mode of change in a permanent kind of mode or situation. So I think this is most probably from institution to institution different. But at least we have the window of opportunity. And I think some of the universities also, they really try to use this window of opportunity to bring in additional changes, mm-hmm. not only kind of driven by COVID, but yes. those kind of issues they just couldn't, mm-hmm. Tackle in the last decade or so. Yes. So there's some homeworks which they had for many years on the table. Now they use this the cope so that they under the radar or with COVID to bring in those changes into the university.
Yeah, actually, I think if we're talking about change management, actually, COVID was a good thing for pushing change management and for pushing the urgency especially of change, right? Another thing I would like to cover here that you also mentioned is, I think, the speed of change or the willingness to change, or the underlying mindset under changing an organization. It depends, especially in a university, it depends as well of its nature, if it's public or private, right? What would you say this? Because from what I've seen in my experience, like private universities, I come from Peru. In Peru, the majority of universities are private, so they are much more depending on market trends and market needs, because they need to make profit, right? They need to make revenue, which doesn't happen with public universities. So how do you see this contrast between public and private universities regarding change?
I think in general, most probably you're right that those private universities are more kind of flexible towards change, because they are from their origin very dedicated towards markets, and really did this approach of a demand and supply. Mm-hmm. While public universities are maybe not that fast because of their funding, because of their staff structures, and so on. But I would not entirely agree with this kind of black and white approach that because of the nature of private public. I think this is more also related to the leadership of the particular university. I already mentioned this: the age, the size, the strategy, the mission. This is a kind of a specialized university, is a comprehensive university. In the case of a comprehensive university, most probably you have a larger diversity inside a university, so that you might take a bit longer to negotiate with all different kind of actors and try to involve all of them, while in a technical university, or in my case, the University of Continuing Education with a dedicated kind of mission, it might be a bit easier. So I think that we can't really say that, you know, in one case it's easier, in another cases it's a more challenging. And then of course those institutions are embedded in systems, as just you said, your case in Peru. Yes. In our cases, you know, in Austria, you have to also kind of bring in this change initiative into a context, into a higher education system, and this might be also very, you know, important. So how open-minded is how flexible this higher education system is towards substantial changes, for example.
Yes, yes. By the way, I'm not saying that this market-oriented approach is the best one for universities. I actually don't believe so. At least in the case of Peru, this leads us to have really low research production, because we are so, like universities in Peru are so focused on being with the market and generating programs that are that have market fit, in selling programs that leave research and innovation in a second stage, let's say, which I don't think it's the right thing to do, especially given given the challenges of the future, right? Okay, but to close this interview, I would like to ask you one last question. So I think we can agree that change is something that has to happen for all universities, regardless of their nature, regardless of their change status. Some of them are more advanced, some of them are less advanced. Would you say that there is an alternative to change? Would you say that there's is there a possibility of not changing for universities that have, as you mentioned, you know, like high traditions, strong values, and an integrity that is already established, and that doesn't really communicate or go along with what the change requires?
I think that the notion of change is not entirely, you know, negative connotated. I very often I have the feeling that we use change as, you know, well, something is wrong, something is not working well, and therefore we need a change. So you have immediately this, you know, this why we need a change? We are doing good. So why this
why
change?
Fix what's not broken?
And I think that this is the wrong kind of approach to look at on you know, this change issue. I think that the change is, you know, part of our entire life. I think we change permanently, even within a day as individuals.
Yes.
And I think that this is also the case when it comes to institutions, not only universities, but other organizations as well. The question is how we are kind of, you know, perceiving change as a learning process or as an evil, you know, making our life you know, as a catastrophic exercise. And I think as long as we understand change as a learning process, and this might, you know, fit quite well into the idea of learning organization and the university, then I think this is something that we could see as a necessity in order to keep our values, in order to keep our missions alive.
Okay.
And maybe the very last point here, if we neglect change, then we are neglecting reality. And I think this is just moving back to the ivory tower, which is also, you know, a possible strategy, but this is not something that I think the society
it's nothing sustainable
like to see. And I think that should be not the case in the future.
I agree, and I really like this approach that you took about, I think, a good strategy for approaching change in an institution that has a lot of resistance to change is to understand change as a learning process and not as that you're doing something wrong and you have to change it, right? Like, I think this is a very it's a very good approach to understanding the nature of change and to accepting change in a less difficult way, let's say this, in an easier way, and having less difficulties in accepting change. How to do that and how to convince the faculty that they should take this approach is another discussion that maybe we can have this in another podcast. For now, I think it's our time to close, but I definitely would like to, I will highlight this part, you know, like understanding the nature of change and understanding change as a learning process might be the key of trying to, you know, kind of fighting with all the resistance and overcoming the resistance. Thank you, Attila, for your insights. This has been a very insightful conversation. And I don't know if you have any final remarks on what I just said.
Yeah, that's just thank you very much for inviting me. It was quite interesting also to reflect on those issues regarding change and the different aspects around change. And this is, I think, not a if you look to the literature, is a huge number of publications related to change in higher education. And so thank you very much for picking up this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that I could also contribute with maybe one or another idea here to take forward. And again, this is not a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's an evolutionary topic and an evolutionary approach. And thank you very much. And all the best.
Although I would say that some evolutionary process requires some kind of revolutions, but then we can discuss about this somewhere in the future.
Yeah, well, this is not so. Also, evolution.
I'm a rebel,
also evolution. Also evolution had some revolutionary steps or modes, or epochs. So this is not the case, but in general.
Thank you for listening to the Innovation in Higher Education podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter to not miss any episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as @InnovationInHigherEd. Cheers!